How do you write a killer sequel without going through the middle book slump? Today, I'm giving you all the answers to that question. Welcome back to Pen to Paper. I'm Leah Lindman, author of the Canadian Reminiscence series. And if you're here for the first time, welcome. What do I do on this channel? On AuthorTube days on Wednesdays, we talk everything to do with writing tips, tricks, publishing, marketing, all sorts of different issues and topics that I cover. So before we launch into today's how to write a sequel, why don't you go ahead and like and subscribe to this channel, like the video, and we'll get started. So, first point that you're going to want to know about writing a sequel is that you don't want to over summarize. Why? Well, maybe you're thinking, they're new readers. They don't know where our characters are coming from, so we need to tell them everything that happened. Not true. I'm going to go into it a little bit later, but your sequel really should be able to stand on its own 2 feet. So you can give backstory when the time is necessary for them to know something about your character from the first novel, but don't overdump, don't over summarize at the beginning. When that happens, you've lost the reader, you've lost the interest, you've lost the momentum to launch into your new story. Number 2, you are definitely going to want to have some new character arcs. Now, your characters are no longer the same people after the events of the first book. They have changed, they have grown. I'm actually going to quickly demonstrate how you want this to look like. Maybe give you some sort of visual that you can understand and see, okay, this is how it needs to be. So here's book 1. Don't make fun of me. I am not a great illustrator. Here's book 2, right? This is what we're talking about here. Okay. So you want your characters in book 1 to start here, and over the course of book 1, they're going to grow into their new character. They're going to grow, they're going to develop. You're going to do the same thing for book 2. But don't forget, you don't have book 2 without book 1. So make sure there's an overall character development coming in between book 1 and book 2. Goodness, I hope you can see this right now. So book 1 has a character arc, book 2 has a character arc, but there's a character arc connecting book 1 to book 2. And this is not only just for your main character, you're going to be doing this for all your characters. All of your characters have gone through things that are going to make them grow in certain ways, develop, and so we want to see that character growth. So make sure you include new character arcs in your second work. Number 3, you are going to want to be original. Why? We don't want a rehash of number 1. We want something fresh, some new character arcs, new storyline. You can't just be, they solved a murder mystery, whodunit, mystery weekend, book 1, and then do the same thing book 2. Like, it can still be a murder mystery, but there's all kinds of different murder mysteries. So liven it up a little bit. Give it a different setting. Give it a different stakes. But it's got to be different. It's got to be original. If they wanted to really rehash the first one, they could just reread it. That's what rereading books are for. So don't do that to your readers. Number 4, not only do you want to be giving something new with your plot, but this would be a great time to insert new characters. And they could be the friends of your main characters, or they could even be new villains. But this is a great time to just, you still have the lovable, endearing characters maybe they're not so lovable, but they're interesting, and that's what gets your readers. You still have them, but you insert a new character to change things up. Newness keeps the momentum going toward what you want the stakes and the plot to be for your second one. So for example, you could even do this for the sequel to my first book, Redeemed from the Ashes. The sequel takes place 11 years later. Now, I didn't necessarily put in a new character. There's a character who used to be a kid in book 1, so you kind of see their personality and how they were back then. But 11 years later, they're a young man. They're kind of like looking at the world differently, and time changes him. And so in a way, he's new and fresh. So the reader gets to know him in a different way. And I did the same thing for the sequel to book 2. So book 2 is Wisps of Gold. The sequel is Scathed Bones. There I inserted a new villain, which was a lot of fun. The Canadian legendary serial killer Agnes McVie. You can check that out. Number 5. You can also let something go. You can let characters go, killing them off, which Game of Thrones is very, very good at, by the way. They don't necessarily have to be killed off. They could be moved out of the story, but remember, whatever you do has to make sense. You can't just do things and then expect the readers and expect your characters to just go along with it. If it comes out of the blue, if there's not a reason for that removal or for that addition, you have to be reasonable with what you're going to be doing. And it could be that that character or that arc or that plot line is removed for now, but it's kind of brewing in the background because it might return. Let's say for if you're doing a series like book number 3, then it will return in the next book. So you can kind of play around with that, but don't just remove something and then let it be. There has to be a reason, but if you do let something go, it's a great way to change things up. All right, let's look at number 6. Time changes everything. If your sequel is happening years after the first one, your world, your plot, and your characters should indicate that time has changed. We don't want to confuse our readers. Now, obviously, you could write 2 years later or the next day. You could do that, but even if you do that, don't use it as a cop-out to kind of keep everything the same. Everything has to change. And now, if you're writing a sequel and it literally happens right after the first one is done, take in mind that sometimes the circumstances that we go through as people impact us in the way we view time. So there may be some circumstances that we've gone through where time just seems to be passing us by, but it feels as if no time has passed. Like the world is moving so slowly because we're so stuck in a mental state of not moving or being sluggish or just numb to what's going around us. So it might seem that the passage of time is incredibly slow. There's other circumstances where it just seems like everything is flying by and we have no control and we're freaking out. Whatever your character has gone through, it should relay the viewpoint of time. Maybe time hasn't passed, but how do they see time having passed? Number 7 should be new conflicts. Again, I'm going to put some fresh juice into this book. Let's look at the diagram again. So in book 1, we had some questions that got answered. In book 2, we're going to have more questions that should be answered. However, in book 1, there should be at least one question. Great if there's 2 that were not answered. So what are we going to do in book 2? We're going to answer them. We're going to satisfy the reader and give them that sequel that's not slumpy, that's not leading into another book and everyone looks back at it as like, well, what was it there for? We want it to be here for a reason, whether it stops at the sequel or are building to something else. Number 8, give fan service to what your readers loved in book 1. So I know I've been hitting hard of inserting new characters, new character arcs, new conflicts. It should be fresh, it should be original. But listen, your readers loved your first book for reasons, or a reason. So take that reason, whatever it may be. It could be the characters, it could be your world building, it could be your plot, or your genre, and just take aspects of that and grow it, expand it in book 2. Don't give them something completely fresh and original that they're like, I don't even know that this is from the same writer. Like, I was expecting something very different, but I got this thing that just appeared out of nowhere. We don't want to give them that. We want to give them newness in the context of what they kind of expect, what they know a little that they'll be getting from you. But, of course, you want to insert that newness in there. So figure out what makes your book tick, what makes it so special, and then just think of the word expand it into your second book. Number 9 is surprise. Now, I love reading these surprises as a reader. It just catches me off guard. And then there's these questions of like, well, why did that happen? And how did it happen? And how could I have been so blind to the truth? Right? It could be that allegiances have flipped or spun. It could be that whatever you thought happened in book 1 didn't actually happen, but it's happened like this and we're still learning about it. These are always a lot of fun to read. And as a writer, they're a lot of fun to write. However, if you do a surprise, make sure there's a reason for it, right? You don't want to just insert a surprise and then it doesn't make any sense and you expect the reader to take that. Yeah, no, that's not going to happen, okay? And your character shouldn't take the surprise in and be like, oh yeah, that's chill, we're cool with that. If there's no reason, there has to have a reason. So you're building that momentum for the story for your second book. Now last but not least, plan ahead for all of these things to make an amazing sequel. Now for you plotters out there, this is like a no-brainer. Of course we're going to plan ahead. We're going to plan ahead like 5 books in advance, and we're going to plan ahead all the chapters and paragraphs. Okay, I know you maybe some of you are that detailed. Maybe some of you are not that detailed. Whatever detail level you have is fine. I am going to speak specifically to pantsers because we don't typically like to plan ahead. We like to go with the flow and let the story lead where it wants to lead. I'm not against that. I am in the camp of pantsers, I promise you. So let's talk a little bit about this. If you don't plan ahead, you may confuse yourself or the reader if you're adding things in here that maybe were answered here or that didn't even have to do with book 1. It's a good idea to have a vague sense of where you want to go after book 1. The way that those details play out, you can leave it up to whatever your process is of pantsing. But I did the same for both sequels to my standalone novels, where I kind of had an idea of what the historical event was going to be, the how many years in between or time in between, and the general growth of my character and what they may encounter in the sequel. How that all played out, I pantsed. Promise, the whole way through. But I did have some idea of how I wanted things to go. And that just gave me some clarity into knowing how I could do all this effectively. I hope that these tips have been helpful to you. Tell me down in the comments below, which one are you excited to get into the most? And if you're listening to this on my podcast, please leave a review and I would love to hear how this has been helpful to you. Now, I won't be here next week because next week I'm in Cuba with my husband. So I'm looking forward to some vacation time. But I will be here the next week with more content like this.